Hey, what's up everyone? Out here in the pole barn today, we're going to do a little DIY taxidermy with a few racks that I've had sitting out here. I'm going to show you guys my favorite way to do some cheap plaque mounts that still look really good. And we're going to be using this right here, the Mountain Mike shed spreaders. So stay with us. Alright, so here's what the end result's going to look like. This is one that I just finished up. Why I like to do these, so these are really cheap, they're easy, and I think they look really clean. So the cheap part, the shed spreader is $11.99, and then I make my own wood plaques. If you can't do that, you can probably find a wood plaque, depending on the size and the wood, for 10 to 20 bucks. I see a lot of them for about 10 bucks. So I think this looks a whole lot better than just screwing a, obviously a cleaned up skull plate, but just screwing the actual skull plate of the deer to a plaque. Especially when you get these up on the wall, when they're all the same, they're all nice and uniform, they're all even. I think they just look a lot cleaner. So, all right, here's what's inside one of the shed spreader packs. So you've got two different skull plates. They're different diameters on the base. Just pick whichever one matches your antlers best. I find this smaller one is usually better if it's a 1.5 or 2.5-year-old buck that doesn't have a lot of mass. The bigger one, some of your bigger 2.5-year-olds and anything 3.5 plus usually looks best on these. Just pick whichever one works best for your antlers. You're going to get a base plate. This is what attaches to your plaque, and then some mounting hardware. So the first step when you do these is going to be cutting the antlers off of the skull plate. I know a lot of people don't like doing that. They don't like separating the antlers off the original skull plate, but if you cut it right and you take a couple measurements, you can get the shed spreader to look pretty much exactly the same. So on the back of the package, it actually has really good instructions, and one of the things it's going to tell you to do first is to measure the inside spread. You do want to do that, but another thing that I have found is really helpful is measure the inside spread like it says, but also measure your tip to tip of your antlers and then your brow tine tip to tip. All right, so now that you got your antlers cut off, it's time to kind of fit them up to one of the skull plates. I like to use just a little bit of tape, try to hold them down, retake my measurements. You might have to move them around, spin them, do a few adjustments until you get them to where you want them. If you are struggling, especially with some of the tip to tip, brow tine and the tips of your antlers, what you may have to do, and I haven't had to do this a lot, but you may have to just knock a little bit of the shed spreader off on both sides on like a sanding wheel or using a file to just change the angle of the bases. That's going to help you if your measurements just aren't coming out quite right, or your antler set looks a little goofy on the shed spreader. It's usually a lot easier to try to take material off of the plastic base plate than it is to continue to try and sand your antlers, just so you don't start messing up your bases or taking too much material off of them. So once you get it fit up, get it where you like it. I like to put quite a bit of tape around the base, and then you're going to drill your holes. All right, once you've got your antlers fit up where you want them and all taped up, it's time to drill your pilot hole. So I like to do that with the shed spreader mounted, just so I'm not drilling a goofy angle or something. If I'm just trying to drill the antler by itself, I like to have this really taped down and drill my pilot hole right through here, just like it's sitting like this. The fasteners that come for your antler, they are pretty beefy. They're pretty long and it's a pretty big diameter, so you can use them. Just know that especially on some smaller antlers like these ones, your bases aren't super huge. If you just get a goofy angle or you drill too far, I always just get nervous about actually drilling through my antler. So I save these, and I usually just use like 1.5 inches, just like a drywall screw. And you'll see it will protrude plenty far through the bottom of this thing to fasten an antler on. And this one's actually a little bit longer, but you don't really need a ton. You can use just about any screw you want. You don't need a lot to hold it on. Even something just like that, it's going to hold your antler on perfectly fine. You don't need a super long screw. So if you've got something else, don't be afraid to use something shorter. If you want to use these big ones, especially if you got a really big set of antlers, go for it. But I'm going to show you where I use these in a minute. So after you drill your pilot holes, You fasten your antlers on, you're going to be at basically this step. Remember, once these are on, the only thing you can do is rotate them. So you can spin them and you can tweak your width and your antler tip to tip, but you can't do any other changes. So if something looks goofy, you might have to take them off. Again, it's easier to knock material off of the shed spreader if you need to, but once you get it set up where you like it, fasten them down, and we'll move. All right, from this point forward, everything's really straightforward. So we're now going to put the back plate on our plaque. I just used one screw that's provided, and this is a pine plaque, so it's really soft wood. I just tightened it down with a screwdriver, got it nice and level and even. And then I'm going to take those big screws that were used for the antlers, and I'm going to use those to mount the skull plate to the back plate. All right, we got the skull plate onto the backing plate. So these screws, because they are a little longer, the reason I only used one little screw in the back plate is because if you use these to attach the actual skull plate to the back, it will go through the back plate a little bit and into your plaque. So just know that, but it actually makes it a lot more secure than just using that one little screw back there. All right, check them out. We got them hung up left and right of another mount here in the basement. They turned out really well. I'm really happy with them. And they look and are extremely close to how these deer were when they were harvested. I'll actually go ahead and show you a couple images of the mount compared to the actual deer when I shot them. So thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please hit that like button down below, and also be sure to hit that subscribe button. We're going to be doing a few other DIY mounts here using the shed spreaders, and I'm also going to do a couple reviews of some of the other mount kits that I've used. So stay tuned. Hope you guys are having a great new year. Remember, be a sportsman, make sportsmen.